when I saw our next speaker marching with the children and adults from Misericordia at the St. Patrick's Day parade, I knew that he was truly a representative of all of Chicago, the most American of American cities. In other words, he got it. Number two, a critical asset of being a great mayor is their ability to assemble a winning team. And any time you discuss Mayor Emmanuel's tip-top all-star team, you always hear the name Dorval Carter. Our next speaker has been able to attract the best team because he gets that too. Please welcome Mayor Rahm Emmanuel. Mayor.
Jay, I want you to know, not that I'm keeping score, but your introductions are getting shorter and shorter. First of all, I just do want to start. We're talking about public transportation. It's been in the news of recent, and then, as you know, the Metropolitan Planning Council issued a recent report that I think was very, very significant about the economic benefits that come to an economy, a neighborhood, the overall economy, and particularly a neighborhood where you have new transit or improved transit. And if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it because it actually backs up the investment strategy of what we've been doing at CTA. I don't think it should be lost on anybody. In the last 5 years, Chicago is the #1 city in the United States for corporate relocations every year for 5 consecutive years. For 6 consecutive years, Chicago is the #1 city in the United States for direct foreign investment, which is a $4 trillion market. That means that money can go anywhere. We're the only city, not only we're the #1 city in the United States, we're the only city in the United States in the top 10. And last year, it was London, Paris, Singapore, Amsterdam, and Chicago. And if you look at any prospectus, Amazon or any major company, transportation, and specifically mass transit, is a key component of how they decide where they're going to go. And Dorval's going to lay out to you what has been the strategy. It's one of the largest capital plans in the United States of America. It's one of the largest recapitalization plans anywhere, and not only in America and the United States, but in the history of the CTA. And if you didn't see it, last week in the New York Times is a full-page story. Learning, it could be an ad, just saying, I am a middle child, after all, learning from Chicago subway transformation. There was a story in the New York Times, what New York should learn from Chicago. And I just want you to know, I am a middle child, and I've said, middle children wrote a book, War or Peace. We could do either one. And just being the punk I am, I called New York, my colleague, and said, in case you didn't see it, just thought maybe, if they haven't put it in your clip service, you may want to read a story. Now, in addition, isn't this great? Every elected official has a bubble above their head. They want to say something, and now that bubble's coming right out of my mouth. Second, yesterday there was a poll released. It was actually done by a company for electric scooter, of which they said 84% of the people are highly satisfied with the Chicago Transit Authority, CTA. 83%. You couldn't get 83 people in New York to be satisfied with the MTA, let alone 83%. But all that adds up to the fact is this investment is a key part of our neighborhood strategy and a key part of our economic strategy for the city of Chicago. We are at a point, the highest employment since 1950, with the lowest unemployment in the history of Chicago. The CTA and the modernization of the CTA is a key component and a key piece of that strategy. And just to give you a sense of the movement we're doing, in the next 2.5 months between now and the end of the year, we're going to open up 5 new stations that have been totally rehabbed, starting with the big one, the 95th Street station at the end of the red line, to modernize that. Belmont Blue, Jefferson Park Blue, Quincy Station downtown, and then the Garfield Station on the Green Line on the south side of the city of Chicago. And that's just a piece, with only more to come after the first of the year. I cannot think of a better person to run and steer this incredible $8.5 billion capitalization to make a 21st century economy run on a 21st century transportation system. Dorval's been working, and his entire team, at breakneck speed to ensure that we have and stay and modernize the system that, the truth is, used to be running around 15 miles an hour and now is actually going at the pledged speed of 55 miles an hour. I take the train 2 to 3 times a week to work. You don't want to be Dorval in the morning when the mayor's taking the train. Trust me. He is a recipient at 7:35 of everything right and everything wrong on that train ride. Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, Dorval Carter takes the battery out of his phone. He's been a great person that lead this effort. Please give a warm reception to Dorval Carter.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here today to talk to you about CTA. I also want to thank the mayor, who has graciously found the time in his incredibly busy schedule to introduce me each and every time that I've appeared before City Club. And that certainly is an expression of his support for public transportation and his leadership here in the city of Chicago. On behalf of the Chicago Transit Board, including our chairman, Terry Peterson, I want to say a thank you to the City Club of Chicago for inviting me here today to speak. Today marks my 6th appearance at City Club. Wow. Each time I've joined you here, I've discussed what CTA has accomplished in the recent past and detailed the infrastructure improvement projects we're working on, like the ones you see above. I've also spoken about CTA's history and its vital contribution to the city's growth and development. As a matter of fact, just before arriving at City Club today, I was marking the 75th anniversary of the State Street Subway, which today carries the Red Line. The subway is just one of the many examples of how Chicago has long been an innovator in transportation and transit. And in fact, there is a memorial plaque sitting in the Smithsonian Museum today, honoring the achievement of the State Street Subway. Today, however, I would like to focus on CTA's future. But before we do, I want to give you a quick reminder of where we've been and why that matters. For decades, transportation options in Chicago remained unchanged. If you had to travel locally and riding your bicycle or walking was impractical or impossible, you had 3 choices: drive yourself, take a cab, or catch a CTA bus or train. For years, these were great and convenient options. The CTA was, to be sure, the most affordable among them. But CTA has moved from being a player in a small transportation landscape to a part of an increasingly vast mobility ecosphere. Over the past decade, our transportation options have grown. They still include, of course, your car, cabs, and CTA's buses and trains. But now, one can also choose Uber, Lyft, Via, Car2Go, Divvy, Lime Bike, electric scooters, enterprise car sharing, and in the not too distant future, autonomous vehicles. AVs are no longer a question of if, they are a question of when. And they are also a question of how will they fit with everything else I just described. Cities, in order to grow and thrive, need to be visionary with their plans for the future of public transportation and mobility. Behind me, you see some examples of what the city of the future might look like. And you may recognize one of these concepts as a homegrown one. Earlier this summer, the mayor announced his plans to pursue O'Hare Express with the entrepreneur Elon Musk. Since that announcement, I've been asked if I see that proposal as competition for CTA's Blue Line, which, as many of you know, also runs to O'Hare. The simple answer to that question is no. I see it as complementary. I am not the kind of leader who is parochial about mobility. Cities of the future will have to find ways to work with the other mobility options because we can't just take our ball and go home. The game will go on without us. That said, the autonomous vehicle may one day join the family of transportation options in the city, but it will not be a cure-all. I'd like to share a factoid with you from an industry professional that was recently provided to me. If all of the workers at Willis Tower took autonomous vehicles to work, it would take 7 hours for all of them to arrive at the building. The bottom line here is that there is no simple way to get to downtown Chicago and through our congested streets that can handle all the vehicles to provide what we can provide. Chicago's transportation landscape has never been more diverse than it is today. For our customers, and in fact all residents of and visitors to the city, it presents new opportunities for getting around to work, school, recreation, and other destinations. Additionally, people are now able to customize their trips as they see fit, and never before have they had so many similar priced options. To truly understand CTA's place in this larger conversation, one must go back and take a look at the innovation that created the nation's transportation system. Chicago became the transportation hub of the country, and public transit has played a role in the evolution of transportation for the past century plus. This city is an example of how the symbiotic relationship between the expansion of transit and the population it serves helps cities grow and thrive. Since the city's beginnings, right up until today, we have seen that where transit goes, so go the people, and vice versa. That is why cities like Los Angeles, Seattle, Honolulu, and others are spending billions of dollars today to create the kind of system that already exists right here in Chicago. To be sure, CTA's bus and rail system is a time-tested and robust method of getting around, and our agency stands as the elder statesman of shared mobility. But we are looking forward, continuing to plan for a strong future, and working to introduce new innovations, like our new 7000 series rail cars in 2020. We're thinking outside the box, re-envisioning how to make our entire bus fleet zero emissions and what it would take for us to get there. In fact, we will soon add 20 electric buses to our fleet, which will give us one of the largest electric bus fleets in the country. We continue to look forward because we know that no matter what new technologies and systems enter the transportation arena, public transportation can provide advantages that other providers can't. Why? Capacity. Because a CTA train can carry more than 600 people, and one CTA bus can carry the equivalent of a few dozen cars, there is no other mobility option that can do the same thing. This ability to move large groups of people simultaneously is critical to facilitating growth that keeps congestion under control, commuting time to a reasonable level, and provides a sustainable framework for a truly livable city. Not only do we move more large numbers of people, we do it faster than any other option in Chicago. The time it takes to travel by car from O'Hare to downtown during the morning rush hour can vary widely under even the best of circumstances. Will it take an hour? Will it take 90 minutes? Will it take 2 hours or more? Unfortunately, you just never know. But CTA's Blue Line will get you there in 45 minutes. I'm certain that at some point, some of you in this room have been sitting on the Kennedy in traffic and watched a CTA train fly by and thought, geez, I should have taken the CTA. We agree. But not only do CTA trains get you around the Chicago area more quickly, we do it for a price that can't be beaten. If you're headed from the south side to Wilmette, it will cost you $2.50. That same amount of money will get you from Guaranteed Rate Field to Wrigley Field when we hold that Subway World Series one day. From Midway Airport to your downtown hotel, from Oak Park to Willis Tower, from Evanston to Kennedy Keene College, and almost anywhere else our system goes. Now, those same prices, if you are using ride-hailing services, those are going to cost you a bit more. Now, I'll let you know that we didn't make these prices up. We put these trips in to the apps, and these are what we found it would cost to take either an Uber X or a Lyft during recent rush hour. As you can see, the prices range from roughly 10 to 20 times more than CTA's base rail travel price. I think this illustrates my point. CTA is not only your best rush hour option, but we move more people more affordably every day. And that's why public transportation matters. However, in order for CTA to retain that competitive advantage, we must continue to innovate. Each one of us remembers when the items on the screen were considered the best technology we had to offer. I suspect right now in your basement or attic, you may have an old Betamax, an Atari 2600, a brick-style cell phone, or even an 8-track tape by a legendary group once known as the Chicago Transit Authority. These things were all once thought of as cutting-edge technology, in demand by early adopters and seen as the wave of the future. And they were, until they weren't. Today, they are dinosaurs, something we cannot afford to allow CTA to become. To avoid that fate at CTA, we are asking the same questions we should all be asking. What kind of city do we want to be? No matter the answer to that question, for all the reasons I've mentioned, transit must be an important part of the discussion. And I believe that CTA will always play a critical role in the transportation equation. Transit is the linchpin of a vibrant, sustainable city. It is the key to a car-free and maybe carefree lifestyle. And it is something that has and will continue to benefit each and every one of us, because the role that we play in reducing congestion and increasing livability will ultimately contribute to everyone's success. That is part of the mission of Mayor Emmanuel's new Transportation and Mobility Task Force, which the mayor announced a few weeks ago. It's going to be chaired by former U.S. Transportation Secretary and my former boss, Ray LaHood. The task force will look at the overall transportation landscape, seeking ways to support a vibrant public transit system, and explore how to incorporate new mobility technologies and companies into the city's transportation system. In other words, it's going to teach us all how to play in the sandbox. As all of you know, the popularity of ride-hailing services like Uber and Lyft continues to rise. While we are certainly keeping an eye on the residual effect that the dynamic has had on public transit, CTA is taking what we believe is a coordinated approach to mobility. We recognize that ride-hailing services provide a convenience that consumers want, and we believe the key is to create a model that works across the spectrum of all consumer options. A big part of creating that model is getting the public to understand what happens when you support and expand transit. Unfortunately, despite all the positives that I've mentioned, the bottom line is that CTA has been sustaining a declining level of ridership. There are multiple contributing factors for that, including ride-hailing services, gas prices, population, and commuting shifts. And though ridership is an important performance measure by any transit agency, it is certainly not the only one. In fact, our friends at the Metropolitan Planning Council just released a great study entitled Transit Means Business. You heard the mayor speak to that study as well. All I'm going to tell you is everyone in this room should read that study because it makes the case for why public transportation is more than just ridership. In fact, one of the favorite quotes in that study is, "A growing and thriving transit system means a growing and thriving economy." To understand the value of what transit provides beyond an affordable trip between points A and B, one need only witness the role that transit development is playing in economic development. Perhaps nowhere has that been more evident than at the Morgan Station on the near west side, around which there has been a boom in building permits and business licenses, along with headquarters like Google and McDonald's. Now, while I would love to take sole responsibility and credit for that phenomenon, we do recognize that we are part of many factors that are influencing that growth. We do know, however, that the availability of quality public transit is an important part of the decisions being made by these businesses. An increase in residential development around the renovated Wilson Red Line station and an uptick in gross commercial rents around the Cermak McCormick Place Green Line station is also an example reflecting how transit can spur economic development in the city. Those projects have been part of an unprecedented $8 billion in transit investments that have been made since Mayor Emmanuel became mayor. Since 2011, CTA has completed, begun, or announced more than 40 new and renovated CTA rail stations, which is nearly 30% of all the rail stations in our system. As you can see from the examples on the screen, so many of those projects have turned outdated infrastructure, some of it nearly 100 years old, into modern, customer-friendly facilities. And we've also vastly improved the vertical accessibility of our stations. Currently, 71% of our rail stations are accessible. That's the highest total of any other legacy transit system in the United States. But I want to do even better than that, which is why earlier this year, I announced a plan to reach 100% accessibility in the next 20 years. Projects like the Wilson Station and Garfield Green have completely rehabbed unused and neglected CTA areas into community spaces, including a new community grocery co-op inside the Wilson Station's historic Gerber building. When the late Apple computer founder Steve Jobs would close a presentation talking about new products, he always held something back, something for last. He was fond of saying that he had one more thing, but it was always a big reveal, whatever that thing may be, whether it be cutting-edge product or new technology. It was intended to be something that would make you think about where Apple was going. So today, I have a few more of those things I'd like to talk to you about. Some are conceptual, and some are on the horizon, but they are the things CTA, as a transit leader, has at the front of its collective mind. We are always looking for ways to utilize new technologies to improve service and assist our customers. In fact, to any of the technology companies in the room today, I want you to know that CTA is open for business. We want to hear from you. We want to get your ideas. We want to be the first transit system in the country to implement something. Many of you may remember the complaints several years ago about the lack of coordination and cooperation between CTA, Metra, and PACE. That has changed, and technology has helped bridge that gap. We no longer have conversations about just CTA, or just Metra, or just PACE. It is a regional dialogue. Innovations like the Ventra app are examples of what can happen when, as a region, we embrace technology to serve our customers. In fact, take a look at the screen above. That represents what you currently see on your phone when you launch the Ventra app. Just a few short years ago, that technology that makes this convenience possible had not yet been adopted. Today, CTA, Metra, and PACE customers have adopted the app as a part of their routine commute. When you visit our online train tracker, this is what you will see. Real-time travel information updates that make traveling CTA trains easier. We believe our transit trackers are incredible tools, but as I noted from the outset, at CTA, we are looking towards the future. This is where I believe mobility is headed. What you're looking at is a possible future vision of one of the many ways we believe transit service across the mobility spectrum can and will ultimately provide services to our customers. Notice the ability to plan transit trips across many available options, currently thought by many to be at odds with one another. The seamless integration of these options, I believe, will be the best indication that we as a community have arrived at a point where we can best serve the traveling public. At the outset of my presentation, I talked about Chicago's historical role as the transportation hub of the country. Our legacy is already established, but it is our vision for the future that will allow us to continue to expand that legacy. What you see on the screen is the next evolution of transit, where automated mobile phones are at the center of a contactless environment, and customers have the ability to plan transit trips across many available options. We are also thinking much differently about how to better use our footprint. Earlier, I mentioned the co-op grocery store at our Wilson station, which is unique for CTA, and that's a good start. But I believe we can go much farther to integrate transit into development and for new ways to bring people together like only public transportation can. The image you see above was created by an architectural firm, HDR, for a recent competition. And I have to tell you, when I first saw this, I was like, that's beautiful. It reimagines how CTA can intersect with public buildings that can be directly connected to our stations. You can see how the station seems to effortlessly become a part of the building, sharing space used by a lending library imagined at the Cottage Grove Green Line station. Here's an interior view of the same building. This, for me, is the next level of transit-oriented development. It is a vision for the seamless integration of community spaces that can feed a transit system. One of the mayor's challenges to me when I became CTA president in 2015 was to find a way to make my bus service faster, make it more reliable, make it more user-friendly. We've made a number of improvements thus far, from reintroducing express service on Western and Ashland to implementing Loop Link. And we're extremely grateful that the mayor just announced $5 million in funding to improve service on two of the busiest bus routes in my system, the number 79 79th Street and the number 66 Chicago. This project will eliminate what we call bus slow zones at intersections and complement the mayor's plan to extend the city transit-oriented development policy to high-capacity bus corridors. We're looking forward to working with our colleagues at CDOT on those important projects. But I'm also excited about something else that you've never seen before: digital screens on buses that include real-time travel updates regarding travel times to upcoming stops and customer alerts about reroutes. My goal with these signs was to provide the customers the same kind of real-time digital information that our rail riders receive. CTA is beginning a pilot of these digital information screens on buses now. These screens will include customer communication opportunities, as seen on the right side of the screen above. That's an image of our award-winning courtesy campaign, but it's also one of a myriad of possibilities of how I can best use that space. We can also use it to provide information about intersecting with other modes of travel, including CTA trains and divvy bikes. Here again, we are pulling the future of mobility closer to us by using technology to benefit our customers. Of course, we can also use the screens to communicate with our bus customers during service disruptions, including letting them know exactly what's happening and providing them with information about other available ways to get around. Any of you who have ridden a bus have found the frustration of getting to a rail station, getting off the bus, going in, and finding out that there's a service disruption that's going to delay your ability to get to home, to work, to school, wherever you're going. Now you won't have to do that. You'll know before you get to the train station that there's a problem, and you will be able to make decisions about what's the best way for you to get to your final destination. And of course, there's more on the horizon. I look forward to announcing more innovations to all of you in the coming weeks and months. Rest assured that we are all dedicated to achieving those innovations and moving this agency forward. In closing, I hope this presentation has given you even a small glimpse into a transit future that I believe is rife with possibilities. I've watched all the changes occur in my industry unfold over the last few years, and I'm ready to tackle those challenges head on. My goal is to take CTA customers somewhere they've never been before, like a transit future that provides rail trips with the scan of your phone or your smartwatch, or that allows you to prepay bus trips before the bus even arrives, so that all you have to do is board, ride, and alight, without ever going into your wallet or your purse. I think our customers should be able to pick up a ride-hailing service in the morning, be taken to a train station where they would seamlessly walk into the station, board a train, go downtown, leave the station, and seamlessly connect to a bus which takes them to their final destination. To make all of this a reality will require the ultimate marriage of technology, infrastructure, and mobility. And of course, funding. I'm sure you all didn't think I wouldn't mention funding somewhere in my presentation. I'm going to have a lot of time to talk to you about funding later when RTA, CTA, Metro, and PACE come back to meet with all of you. But I think I want to say right now, to make any of this a reality, it's going to require the ultimate marriage of all of these aspects to allow us to have the financial resources to implement and develop all these great ideas. The good news is that we as transit leaders recognize that we need to be creative and agile, open to new ideas, and willing to challenge the old way of doing business. I am looking forward to taking on this challenge, and I am looking forward to changing the landscape of public transportation in a city as great as Chicago. It will be the vision of the future that will marry with the legacy of the past. I invite you all to join us as we move forward on this journey, and I want to thank you all for listening to what I had to say today. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm the question man today. Wasn't that fantastic? You couldn't have a better transit leader than Dorval, or a better mayor for mass transit than Mayor Emmanuel, and better employees than we have at the CTA. So that was just awesome. Just a couple of announcements before we take questions, and if you have questions, get the little blue sheets to one of the City Club staffers that are coming around. As Dorval kind of touched on December 4th, you have an opportunity to see this gentleman again, along with his counterparts, Jim Derwinski, who runs Metro, and Rocky Donahue, who's the new head of PACE, Suburban Bus. So another panel for We Transit folks on December 4th here at the City Club. It's a breakfast. And then the City Club, like the CTA, is an integral part of the fabric of Chicago. And the Misericordia Heart of Mercy Ball, I want to put in a plug, is on November 16th at the Hilton in Chicago. The Heart of Mercy Award is going to go to Andy Glore from Sterling Bay, a great economic development partner for Chicago. And then the Sister Rosemary Connolly Service Medallion goes to our own Jay and Colleen Doherty. And Jay, I always appreciate Jay, and I thank him for what he does for people with disabilities in Misericordia. And Jay, being the humble guy that he is and a smart man, always says, "No, it's not me, it's Colleen." But it is our own Jay Doherty and Colleen, and please join us to try to honor Jay and Colleen for what they do with Misericordia. And then many of you, and he couldn't run his elevated trains without their power, and that's the Pillar of the Community Award goes to Ann Pramaggiore from Commonwealth Edison. And so there'll be a further announcements. You can go to Misericordia's website, our website at the City Club, but let's plan on all being there on Friday, the 16th of November, to honor our own, but also most importantly, take care of the folks at Misericordia. Questions? I don't know if you've got more. I'll start with one from Ashvin Ladd, who is a member of the City Club, and basically he says, what are you doing, President Carter, with bus and train bunching?
Well, I think train bunching doesn't happen that often. No, thank you, Jack. Bus bunching, of course, is a challenge, and I think a lot of what you heard me talk about in my presentation was really going to that issue. Bus bunching is a result of a number of things, including the congestion that all of us deal every day when we're in our cars on the city streets. Unfortunately, unlike my rail system, I don't have a dedicated right-of-way to run my buses on. One of the reasons why I'm so excited about the $5 million that the mayor is proposing in his budget is that would be dedicated to really addressing some of the things that create the challenges for my bus system to operate with the right intervals going forward. Dedicated bus lanes, signal prioritization, the things that allow my buses to be a lot more competitive than they are today. One of the other things that really needs to address that is congestion. And the mobility task force that I mentioned earlier is going to be focused on those kind of issues as it relates to how do we make this system work better than it does today to allow traffic to move more easier and at the same time, indirectly from my standpoint, allow my buses to be more reliable in terms of the service that they provide. We're going to be looking at all those things. We're also going to be looking at technology. We have a lot of technology in our buses today. You saw some of the technology I'm talking about putting on the buses, but I think there are the potential for technological solutions to some of these challenges that I want to talk to, innovative companies about to help find a way to improve it.
Super. Thank you. Next question comes from a pillar of the City Club, Stella Black, and I will tell you, President Carter, that Stella and I oftentimes take the 156 right back down LaSalle. So Stella, I know, rides to and from the City Club because I see her on the bus. So her question is, when you are determining the elimination of a bus stop, how much input do you take from the aldermen?
Is that a trick question? When we talk about eliminating bus stops, well, first of all, let me just say something generically about that. There's probably no more controversial action that I can take than eliminating someone's bus stop. And I have, over the course of my career, had more people complain to me about bus stops than just about anything else that I do on the service. But the short answer is yes. We do talk to the aldermen in advance of proposing any sort of adjustment to our bus stops. But we also talk to the community as a whole. We reach out to community, we get community input on this. I have a great team in my government community relations group that works closely with both elected officials and the community to make sure that they're aware of what we're doing, and just as importantly, why we're doing it. Because I don't eliminate bus stops just because I want to make your life more difficult. There are usually other issues that are in place. And believe it or not, sometimes the aldermen themselves are the ones who ask for us to move a bus stop. So, given the tens of thousands of bus stops that we have in the city, there's always going to be a challenge about sort of where they are, when they operate, who has them and who doesn't. There's no real science to that. A lot of it is an art. But we certainly work as much as possible to make sure, because it's obviously in my self-interest, to make sure that we're putting bus stops in places that can make it as convenient as possible for people to use our service. That's certainly the goal, and that's certainly what we try to achieve.
Super. Thank you. Next question is from Jack Hartman, who wants to know, can you ticket cars parked illegally in your bus lanes on places like Michigan Avenue where Ubers or others drop off right at your bus stops that slow buses down?
Yeah, that's a good question. We do have ticketing authority, but we don't have ticketing authority to write moving violations. So if you're parked in a bus lane, I can ticket you for that. But if you just pull in and pull out, I can't. Now, there's no question that that's a problem, and we see it play out particularly in downtown Chicago. One of the reasons that the Mobility Task Force was formed was to try to find policies or make recommendations on policies that might help us address those issues. It is a problem. It's part of the reason that my bus service is slowed up. There's no question in my mind that dedicated bus lanes don't work unless you have an enforcement component that goes along with it. And clearly, we're going to be looking to see how we can improve the enforcement in a way that allows those lanes to work much more efficiently than they do today.
Thank you. If you have more questions, get them to the staff. John from Baxter and Woodman wants to know, and he is a member of the City Club, which is always great. If you're not a member of the City Club, join. It's a great place. Beyond normal routes that the CTA runs, would you ever study autonomous vehicles, I guess, owned by the CTA in certain places for special events or sites?
I think the issue of autonomous vehicles in CTA is on the future. I mean, it's something that's coming. So I think the short answer to that question would be yes. I think that not only will I study it, I think I'm going to have to study it because the technology is going to warrant it. Now, there's a much bigger issue around autonomous vehicles and public transportation, given just the nature of how that service operates. You have a large number of people in a vehicle together. There are safety and security concerns and other things that need to be addressed. But to the extent that autonomous vehicles can provide a more efficient level of service in terms of operation, I think it's something that an agency like CTA truly has to take a serious look at. There is technology that's starting to develop in that area. There are a couple of places in Europe that are actually starting to use autonomous vehicles in a public transportation setting. I have no doubt, as with all autonomous vehicles, that eventually it will be here in the United States. And for all the reasons that I laid out in my presentation, if Chicago is going to be at the forefront of sort of imagining what the future of transportation and mobility is going to be in a city like this, certainly that will be part of the conversation.
Super. All right, if there are no other questions, you want to come up and do the bowl and give away a lunch or two?
Jackie Robinson? No, she's not here. Oh, she's not here. Okay, I'll do it.
Sounds great. Back to Jay. Dorval,
Let's give him a round of
great
applause.
job.
Thank you.
Here, good staff here.